Stephen A., Rondo should be suspended for one playoff game. And I know I don't have to remind you that he was suspended during the regular season, earlier this season, for 2 regular season games for throwing a ball at a referee. So you can't say he didn't have any priors, because he does. And you can't say this was an accident, because it was not. I will give you that Rondo slightly tripped over the ref's back heel just for a second, but then he gathered himself, he righted himself, and he initiated contact. He did chest bump. And to initiate contact with an official, as you well know, it is explicitly written in the rules, if you initiate contact with one of the authority figures on the floor, in this case Mark Davis, then you have to be gone. And I'll just go one game, just one big playoff game, but it's going to be a big one, because it's going to be game 2 at Atlanta, and it well could put the Celtics in a two-game hole.
Well, see, here's my problem with it. You know, technically speaking, you're not wrong. The letter of the law does state that. You know, the fact that he bumped into the referee, there's nothing to talk about. Of course, he should be suspended for a game. I just hope it does not happen. And the reason why I think it shouldn't happen is because I don't like letter to the law on most things. I think that, you know, you've got to take the human element into consideration. You've got to take the intensity of the moment into consideration. I think all of those things being considered, and clearly he was fouled and it wasn't called, and he was upset about that, and he felt like he was getting hacked. And so when you have that situation being what it is, you know you're going to expect a reaction. This is the postseason. It's intense. And I got a problem really with the league, and maybe that's a different subject for another day, Skip, but what really gets to me is all of these ticky-tack calls and the fact that, again, you've got officials taking over the games as if we've come to see them. I mean, it's just gotten to the point where the NBA is just sitting there. I'm just waiting for somebody to get thrown out the game for wearing the wrong colored pair of socks or something like that. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's just too much. It's too much rigidity there, and I just don't like it. I understand it. And I understand inevitably they're going to call for suspension, but I'm really not pleased with that at all. I don't like it. I think they need to relax.
Okay, I'm going to give you this. Mark Davis did miss a previous call at the other end of the floor. The ball went out of bounds. Clearly, it should have been Boston's ball. Rondo was upset about it. But then there's a scrum on the floor, loose ball, all for one, one for all. And you can't allow Brandon Bass to assault Josh Smith on the floor. And he mugged him. You can't get away. You can't say there can be no fouls called on a loose ball situation, because it was a foul. And Rondo didn't like it, so Rondo immediately turned to Mark Davis and went off again. He was probably still mad from the last non-call that he got. And Stephen A., you know and I know, you just can't allow that. It's referee abuse, number one, but then to bump him, number two, you got to go for a game. That's not just the letter of the law. That's the way it has to be.
Well, I'm not disputing that, Skip, but what I'm trying to say is that when the officiating has been as inept as it has been this season, for the most part. I mean, we've seen, and I've never been critical of the officials really, but we've seen some really, really bad officiating this year. And those players having this truncated 66-game season, having to deal with all the stuff that they've had to deal with, to go out on the court and to have to deal with some of the follies, some of the missed calls, you know, all of this stuff that they have to be subjected to on a game-in, game-out basis. You know what? Then give them some latitude with the temper is what I'm saying. Because you certainly, as an official, have latitude with the ineptness that you continue to exhibit throughout this shortened season.
Okay, but you can't subject referees to physical confrontations with players.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not advocating that at all. But at the same time, you know, again, it depends on whether or not you believe the contact was incidental or he really bumped him on purpose.
Do you think it was on purpose?
You believe he bumped him on? I didn't get that. I didn't get that.
Well,
I didn't get that it was on purpose. Not that it was on purpose. I knew he was furious, and I thought I saw him trip a little bit over somebody's foot. But I could be wrong in that regard because I only saw the replay about 2 or 3 times. But I'm just saying that's how I feel about it. And I'm like, unless you are definitive and certain that that's something that he did purposely, then I wouldn't call it intentional. But again, you can't even be near the official in that regard, and it is what it is. So we know what's coming. It's just unfortunate because I think the frustration of how bad these officials have been are really wearing on the players.
Okay, Stephen A., you know and I know Rondo has had anger management issues on and off the court because, help me with this, remind me of it, didn't he throw a projector in a team meeting and storm out?
That's what,
do you remember that
That's what
one?
we heard. That's what we heard. That's not something that he's publicly acknowledged, but it is something that we have heard, no doubt about that. And when he first came into the league, you know, obviously everybody's talking, not first came into the league, but when he first had the big three with them, everybody was talking about the big three, and he was like, wait a minute, he's got his own pride, he knew his own abilities and capabilities, and he wasn't having that. So it took some time to work with him or whatever, but I wouldn't call that anger management issues. I'm very careful of language like that. It's just that he's somebody that doesn't really take a lot of mess, particularly when he's on a basketball court and competing at the level that he competes at on a night in, night out basis.
Stephen A.,
sometimes I don't blame him, to be quite honest with you.
If he has to sit in Game 2, are the Celtics done?
They're not done, but they're in trouble because you need to steal one of these games from Atlanta. Atlanta is weak on the road, particularly in the postseason over the last several years. But they are very, very strong at home. And it's going to be very difficult for the Boston Celtics to beat them at home. If you remember back when Boston won the title in 2008, their first round series was against Atlanta. And that went 7 games. I mean, everybody was worried about it because Atlanta was so hyped for that 7-game series. They had to go back to Boston to close them out. So you don't want to be in the 7th game in Atlanta, and Boston would need to win one of these games, obviously. So having Rondo out for Game 2 definitely hurts them if that happens.
But I am not writing off the Celtics. I love the way the Celtics battled back in this game. I can't make the case that if Rondo had kept his temper and stayed on the floor, that Boston would have won the game, because the foul alone, the Brandon Bass foul, would have put him down 6 because Josh Smith made the 2 free throws. But still, he cost his team an outside shot of pulling that game out last night.
Well, listen, if Rondo is on the floor for Game 2, I think the Celtics win Game 2. If he's not, then you know what? They're not going to win Game 2, and that's the problem. I think that the Celtics with Rondo steals one of these games in Atlanta.